The massive council chamber floated silently in space above the neutral world of Concordia. Inside, representatives from 4 to 7 different alien species gathered for what would become the most important meeting in recent galactic history. The chamber was enormous, with seats arranged in circular tiers that rose toward a domed ceiling made of transparent metal. Through it, stars twinkled in the endless void. Ambassador Victor Blackwood of the Krathax Empire stood at the central podium. His reptilian scales shimmered under the cold lights as he addressed the assembled council members. Around him sat creatures of every imaginable form. The Vrixians looked like giant insects with multiple eyes that reflected light in strange patterns. The Luminari were beings made entirely of crystal who communicated by changing colors. The Nethril existed as clouds of gas contained within special floating chambers. Victor's voice boomed through the translation system that allowed all species to understand each other. The matter before this council is simple and requires no lengthy debate. The human colony on Earth has violated Protocol 7 of our transit accords. When ships from the Krathax Empire pass through their star system, the humans refuse to pay the customary tribute that all civilized species provide. This disrespect cannot and will not be tolerated by our empire. A wave of whispers and strange sounds rippled through the chamber. Some species chittered. Others hummed. The luminari flickered with colors that ranged from curious yellow to concerned orange. Councillor Margaret Hayes, one of the eldest luminari, pulsed with a deep amber warning color. Her voice came through as soft chimes translated into words. Ambassador Blackwood, perhaps we should consider alternative approaches to this situation. The Sol system where humans live has certain complications that you may not be aware of. There are historical reasons why several sectors near human space remain quarantined and off-limits. Victor laughed, a harsh sound that his translation device rendered unpleasant to most species present. Complications? Councillor Hayes, let us speak plainly about facts. The humans are barely capable of traveling between stars. Our intelligence reports show they have only 12 colony worlds scattered across nearby systems. Their military consists of 4 to 5 warships, most of them outdated by galactic standards. They use primitive kinetic weapons that fire solid projectiles. It is almost embarrassing how weak they are. He gestured dramatically, his clawed hand sweeping across the holographic display that appeared before him. Images of human ships and stations materialized in the air, looking simple and unremarkable compared to the elegant vessels of older galactic civilizations. My empire has assembled 300 warships for this punitive expedition, Victor continued with obvious pride. 300 of our finest vessels, equipped with plasma weapons and shielding technology that humans cannot possibly match. This will not be a war. It will barely qualify as a police action. Within one standard week, the humans will surrender, and order will be restored. From the higher tiers of the chamber, an ancient voice creaked through the translation system. Elder Thomas, a Vrixian who had lived for nearly 600 years, stirred in his specialized seat. His mandibles clicked slowly as he spoke. Ambassador Blackwood, do you know the real reason why 5 entire sectors of space near the human territories are marked as quarantine zones? Do you know what actually happened to the Zathol swarm when they made the mistake of entering the Sol system 500 years ago? Victor waved his hand dismissively. I have read the reports, Elder. The Zathol swarm was destroyed by a stellar anomaly, some kind of natural space phenomenon. The quarantine zones are simply administrative precautions created by overly cautious bureaucrats who see danger in everything. Old superstitions and outdated fears have no place in modern military planning. Margaret's crystalline form pulsed bright red now, the luminary equivalent of urgent alarm. Victor, I must insist that you listen to what we are trying to tell you. The humans are not what they appear to be. They have been very careful about what they show to the galactic community. Please, I beg you to reconsider this course of action before it is too late. The decision has already been made, Councillor Hayes, Victor replied coldly. The Krathax Empire will proceed with or without the approval of this council. I am here merely as a courtesy, to inform you of our actions so that no one can claim we acted in secret. Our fleet launches at dawn tomorrow, by Concordia's local time measurement. He bowed stiffly, a gesture of minimal respect, and turned to leave the podium. His footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet chamber as he walked toward the exit. The massive doors slid open and then sealed shut behind him with a heavy thud. As soon as Victor left, Elder Thomas leaned toward the Vrixian diplomat sitting next to him, a middle-aged officer named Robert. The elder's voice was barely a whisper, but his words carried a weight of terrible knowledge. They do not know. They were not there during the border wars 300 years ago. They never asked the right questions. They never wondered why those sectors of space are truly empty, or what the humans actually did when the Zathol made this same arrogant mistake. Robert's antennae quivered nervously. Should we try to warn them more directly? Should we send our own ships to stop this? Elder Thomas settled back into his seat with a sad clicking sound. Would it matter? Pride is the deadliest weapon in the entire galaxy, my friend. And the Krathax have always possessed more pride than common sense. They are about to learn a lesson that will echo through galactic history for 1,000 years. Margaret dimmed to a soft, sorrowful blue. She activated a private communication channel directly to the Krathax flagship that waited in orbit. Ambassador Blackwood, on behalf of all the elder species represented here, I urge you one final time. Do not do this. Humanity is not what you think they are. They are not weak. They are not helpless. Please, I beg you, reconsider before you make a mistake that cannot be undone. The response came back within moments, cold and dismissive. Message received and rejected. The Armada launches as scheduled. Do not contact me again with these baseless fears. In the observation deck overlooking the council chamber, a young woman named Claire Watson stood watching the distant stars. She worked as a human intern assigned to the Galactic Council, part of Earth's diplomatic integration program. When she overheard the announcement about the Krathax declaration of war, she immediately sent an encrypted message back to Earth using the secure communication system. The response she received made her blood run cold and her hands shake as she read it. Message received and understood. Admiral Benjamin Harris sends his regards to the Krathax Empire and to Ambassador Blackwood personally. The Krathax have exactly 48 hours before they learn what a mistake feels like. Prepare for incoming refugees and warn the Council to position observation probes if they want to witness galactic history. Claire stared at the message, confused and frightened. She did not understand why there seemed to be an undertone of grim satisfaction in those words. The Krathax Armada moved through the darkness of space like a swarm of predators. 300 warships traveled in perfect military formation, their hulls gleaming with the pride of an empire that had conquered dozens of worlds. At the center of this massive fleet, the flagship called Conqueror's Pride carried Admiral Richard Kane, the most decorated military commander in Krathax history. Richard stood before a large holographic display that showed him everything about human defenses. The information looked pathetically weak to his experienced eyes. 45 human warships, mostly medium-sized cruisers. Several orbital defense stations circling Earth with conventional plasma batteries. 12 colony worlds scattered across nearby star systems, each one showing minimal military presence. Planetary shield generators that his computers rated as adequate but nothing special. This is almost insulting, muttered Marcus Stone, Richard's second-in-command. The younger officer shook his head as he studied the data. Did the humans really think such weak defenses would protect them from the might of our empire? This will be the easiest victory of my career. Richard nodded slowly, though something about the intelligence reports bothered him in a way he could not quite explain. The numbers seemed too convenient, too perfectly arranged. But he pushed the feeling aside. The Krathax Empire had won 97% of its military engagements over the past century through overwhelming force and superior technology. There was no logical reason this battle would be any different. As the fleet crossed into the outer edges of human territory, their sensors detected the expected response. The 4 to 5 human warships powered up their engines and began moving into defensive positions around Earth. Traffic from civilian orbital stations started evacuating, with small ships fleeing toward the outer planets in what appeared to be panic. The humans are requesting 48 hours to consult with their government about our demands, the communications officer reported from his station. They say they need time to discuss surrender terms. Richard allowed himself a small smile. Grant their request. Let them spend 2 days understanding how hopeless their situation truly is. Sometimes the fear of defeat works better than the defeat itself. They will spend those hours arguing among themselves, and then they will surrender without us firing a single shot. What Richard did not know was that Admiral Benjamin Harris was using those 48 hours very carefully and with cold precision. On the human flagship called Indomitable, Admiral Harris stood calmly with his senior officers. At 67 years old, he had served in the Earth Defense Fleet for 43 years. He had fought in the Outer Colony Wars. He had survived the Raider incursions. He had trained under veterans who remembered the Zathol conflict, and he had spent 30 years preparing for exactly this moment. "Give me a full status report," he said quietly, his voice carrying absolute authority despite its softness. Commander Emily Foster pulled up tactical displays on the main screen. "All civilian evacuations are complete, sir. The Krathax believe we are panicking, but we have actually moved all evacuees to hardened shelters deep in the asteroid belt. The communication satellites are repositioning to their combat configurations. Mining stations Gamma 7 through 19 are reporting full readiness status. What about our colonies? Harris asked. Emily's smile carried a predatory edge. All 12 colonies have activated their secondary defense grids. The Krathak still have no idea those grids exist. Sir, they think our colonies are just farming settlements and mining operations. They have no clue what is really hidden there. Harris allowed himself a small smile. For 30 years since humanity's first contact with the galactic community, they had been playing a very careful and patient game. They had shown just enough military capability to be taken seriously as a spacefaring species, but not enough to be considered a threat to established powers. Every colony world humanity had established had two completely different faces. The galaxy saw farms growing food and mining operations extracting resources. What the galaxy did not see were the concealed weapons platforms, the underground military bunkers, or the fact that each colony could independently support an entire fleet battle group. Lieutenant Andrew Morris, the intelligence officer, pulled up files on Krathak's military doctrine. Sir, their tactical patterns are extremely predictable. They rely on overwhelming force and concentrated firepower. They expect enemies to break formation under pressure and scatter. They have won most of their battles simply by having more ships than their opponents and better weapons technology. They are not creative fighters. Perfect, Harris said. Predictable enemies make planning easy. Commander Daniel Wright, are our special weapons ready? Daniel grinned from his station. Sir, the Krathaks are about to receive a very thorough education in what humans call relativistic weapons. The asteroid rail platforms are locked and loaded. We have 300 tungsten penetrators ready to launch, each one the size of a building, and they will accelerate to 70% of light speed. At that velocity, even a small object becomes a weapon capable of destroying a battleship. The Geneva Protocols? Harris asked quietly, and the entire bridge fell into sudden silence. Every officer present knew what that phrase meant. The Geneva Protocols were not rules that humanity followed during war. They were a comprehensive list of every terrible thing humanity had weaponized during 5,000 years of fighting each other before reaching the stars. Biological weapons that could target specific genetic markers. Nanotechnology that could disassemble matter at the molecular level. Psychological warfare techniques designed to break enemy morale completely. Kinetic bombardment systems that could crack planets. Self-replicating mines that could hunt targets for decades. And those were just the conventional options that humanity was willing to discuss openly. Standing by for your orders, sir, Emily replied carefully. Though I recommend we start with conventional weapons first. No need to show all our cards in the opening moves of the game. Harris nodded his agreement. He opened a direct communication channel to the Krathak's flagship. Admiral Richard Kane's reptilian face appeared on the screen, looking confident and slightly amused. This is Admiral Benjamin Harris of the Earth Defense Fleet. You have entered sovereign human territory with openly hostile intent. I am authorized by my government to offer you one final chance. Leave now, immediately, and this situation ends peacefully. Stay, and face consequences that your empire will remember for centuries. Richard's laugh was genuine and full of amusement. Admiral Harris, I respect your courage in the face of impossible odds. But look at the numbers displayed on your own screens. 300 Krathak's warships against your 45 vessels. This does not have to become a massacre. Surrender now, accept our terms, and your people will be treated fairly under Krathak's administration. Harris's expression turned to ice. Let me tell you something about humanity, Admiral Kane. We spent 5,000 years fighting wars against each other before we ever built our first starship. Do you understand what that means? We learned how to kill efficiently. We got very, very good at destruction. And when we finally stopped fighting each other and reached for the stars, we did not forget any of those lessons. We kept all that knowledge. We kept all those weapons. We kept all that experience. Just in case someone decided to threaten us. Primitive tribal warfare against Empire technology, Richard scoffed. Your history means nothing against modern weapons. The Zathal Hive Queen said something similar, Harris replied coldly. She called us soft mammals playing with fire. The Zathal swarm had 10,000 bioengineered warships. Do you know how many escaped when the war ended? He leaned forward. 0. We hunted every single one across 17 star systems and exterminated them down to the last egg. We made sure they could never threaten anyone ever again. Richard's confidence flickered for just a moment. That was 5 centuries ago. Ancient history. Not history, Admiral. Warning. Harris glanced at the chronometer on his display. Your 48 hours are now over. You crossed into our space. You threatened our homeworld. You ignored every chance we gave you to back down. Now you will learn the most important lesson in galactic history. And what lesson is that? Harris's smile was colder than the void of space itself. Humanity does not fight wars, Admiral Kane. We fight extinction events. And we always make absolutely certain that we are the ones left standing when the shooting stops. This is your last chance. Leave now, or learn why the elder species tried to warn you. Richard cut the communication with an angry gesture. All ships to battle formation. We will crush these arrogant primitives and be home for the victory celebration within days. The Krathax Armada surged forward, 300 ships with weapons charging and shields at maximum power. On the Indomitable, Harris turned to his crew with calm determination. All stations, combat status. Show them what happens when you wake humanity up. Across the Sol system, dozens of satellites suddenly reconfigured themselves, revealing particle beam cannons. The asteroid belt began powering up massive railgun platforms. And from the dark depths of space, new signatures started appearing on sensors. Hundreds of them. The Krathax had no idea what was coming. The first attack from the Krathax fleet lit up the darkness like a newborn star. 300 warships fired their plasma batteries at the same moment, a perfectly coordinated strike designed to shatter human defenses in seconds. Brilliant streams of superheated energy crossed the void and slammed into the human fleet. The human shields held firm. Admiral Richard Kane stared at his tactical display in complete disbelief. His clawed hands gripped the edge of his command console so hard the metal began to bend. That is impossible. Those power readings cannot be correct. Their shields should not be that strong. Our weapons should have cut through them like paper. Marcus Stone, his second officer, checked the sensor data 3 times before responding. His voice carried doubt and the first hints of fear. Sir, the sensors are functioning correctly. The human shields are simply much more powerful than our intelligence suggested. We may have underestimated their defensive capabilities. Then the humans returned fire, and Richard understood with sudden, terrible clarity that everything about this battle was going to be wrong. The human vessels did not fire the expected plasma weapons or laser batteries. Instead, they launched missiles that accelerated at speeds Richard had never seen before. Within seconds, these projectiles reached 70% of light speed, moving so fast they appeared as streaks of deadly light on the tactical displays. When the first relativistic kill missile struck a Krathax destroyer, the ship simply stopped existing. The kinetic energy of the impact was so enormous that it converted the destroyer and a large chunk of space around it into a brief, brilliant cloud of superheated plasma. There was no explosion, no time for emergency systems to activate, no chance for the crew to escape. One moment the ship was there, and the next moment it was gone. Evasive maneuvers. Richard screamed at his fleet, but at relativistic speeds there was no evading these weapons. The missiles moved so fast that by the time sensors detected them, they had already hit their targets. 3 more Krathax ships vanished in flashes of terrible light before the fleet could even begin to scatter. Marcus grabbed his console as the flagship shook from nearby impacts. Admiral, those satellites are changing. They are not communication equipment. They are weapons platforms. Across the solar system, what the Krathax had dismissed as simple communication satellites revealed their true purpose. Massive particle beam cannons extended from hidden compartments. These weapons began tracking Krathax vessels with deadly precision, and when they fired, their beams cut through shields and armor like hot knives through soft butter. All ships, break formation and scatter. Richard ordered desperately. We need to spread out and make ourselves harder to target. Before his fleet could respond, the asteroid belt came alive with light and fury. Commander Emily Foster watched her tactical board with cold satisfaction as the rail platforms achieved their firing solutions. Asteroid batteries 1 through 18 have target lock. Firing now. From hollowed-out asteroids that the Krathax had never bothered to scan carefully, enormous railguns launched their deadly cargo. Tungsten penetrators the size of buildings accelerated along kilometers of electromagnetic rails, reaching velocities that made even the missiles seem slow. These massive projectiles crossed the distance to the Krathax fleet in heartbeats. The right flank of the Krathax formation simply ceased to exist. 27 ships were destroyed so quickly that their crews never knew what hit them. Metal, atmosphere, and bodies were compressed into nothing by the impact forces. On the Conqueror's Pride, Every alarm system screamed warnings from every console simultaneously. Shield failure on decks 7 through 12. Hull breach on decks 9 and 10. Engineering reports critical damage to the port engine systems. The damage control officer shouted reports but never finished his sentence. Another relativistic strike clipped the flagship's port side, sending the massive vessel spinning wildly through space. Richard pulled himself up from where the impact had thrown him across the bridge. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. All ships, emergency withdrawal. Fall back to the outer system and regroup at rally point 7. Sir, our faster-than-light drives are not responding, the navigation officer shouted over the chaos. Something is interfering with our jump calculations. We cannot leave the system. Commander Daniel Wright smiled grimly as he monitored the FTL interdiction field from his station on the Indomitable. Humanity had learned this particular trick from the Zathol, right before exterminating them 5 centuries ago. Interdiction field is fully active, Admiral Harris. The Krathax fleet is trapped. They are not going anywhere until we let them go. Admiral Harris opened a general broadcast channel that reached every Krathax ship. His voice carried across all their frequencies with calm, terrible authority. Attention Krathax fleet. You came to the Sol system to teach us about respect and the consequences of defying your empire. Now let me teach you something about humanity that you should have learned before starting this war. On screens across the Krathax fleet, images began playing. Historical footage from human wars. Ancient conflicts with primitive weapons. Nuclear warfare that had nearly destroyed Earth. Genetic engineering weapons that targeted specific populations. Climate wars fought over dwindling resources. 5,000 years of humans fighting humans, developing ever more creative and efficient ways to kill each other. Then the footage changed to show the Zathol War. Massive biological warships being systematically torn apart by human weapons. The complete destruction of Zathol breeding worlds. The final extermination of their hive queen in the burning ruins of her throne world, hunted down and killed with weapons specifically designed to cause maximum suffering. Harris's voice continued over the terrible images. We did not win that war because we were stronger than the Zathol. We won because we were more creative in our methods of destruction. The Zathol had biological weapons that could consume entire ecosystems. We developed nanodisassemblers that could take apart organic matter at the molecular level. They had acid weapons. We built plasma cutters that could slice through their bioships like they were made of soft clay. For every weapon they created, we invented 3 more terrible responses. Another wave of human missiles tore through the Krathax formation. But this time the weapons did not destroy ships completely. Instead, they precisely targeted engine systems, leaving vessels drifting and helpless in space. Marcus stared at his tactical display in growing horror. Admiral, they are targeting our engines specifically. They are not trying to kill us quickly. They are disabling our ships one by one. Richard felt ice forming in his stomach as understanding dawned. They are studying us. Every ship they disable, every weapon system they hit, every defense we try. They are learning how we build our vessels. They are cataloging our technology. Harris's voice came again, confirming Richard's worst fears. You are correct, Admiral Kane. Every battle is an opportunity to learn. Your shield frequencies, your armor composition, your power distribution systems, your weapon capabilities. We are recording and analyzing all of it. By the time this engagement ends, we will know everything about how Krathax ships function. Thank you for providing us with such valuable data. The human fleet moved like nothing the Krathax had ever encountered. No honorable formation fighting. No predictable attack patterns. Human ships darted in and out like pack hunters toying with wounded prey. They used everything in the solar system as weapons. The gravity wells of planets. The radiation from the sun. Even the asteroids themselves became projectiles when human ships pushed them toward Krathax vessels. One Krathax battle group tried desperately to regroup near Mars. The human vessels drove them steadily toward the red planet, then activated devices the humans called gravity mines. These weapons amplified Mars's gravitational pull by a factor of 100. 15 Krathax ships were suddenly pulled into the planet's atmosphere, where they burned up like meteors, leaving bright streaks across the Martian sky. Ambassador Victor Blackwood's voice suddenly burst across all communication channels from his command ship at the rear of the formation. This is a war crime. The Galactic Council will hear about these atrocities. You are violating every civilized rule of engagement. You cannot do this. Commander Emily Foster's response was delivered with ice-cold precision. Ambassador Blackwood, humanity never signed the galactic rules of engagement. Do you know why? Because we read those rules carefully and realized they were written by species who had forgotten how real wars are actually fought. You want to see war crimes? We have an entire list ready. We call it the Geneva Checklist. Richard Kane watched helplessly as his proud fleet dissolved around him. 300 ships had become 200. Then 150. Then fewer still. The human forces had lost exactly 4 vessels, and intelligence suggested those had been deliberately sacrificed to lure Krathak's forces into carefully prepared kill zones. This is not war, Marcus whispered, his voice broken. This is systematic extermination. They are not just defeating us. They are teaching the entire galaxy a lesson using our bodies as the classroom. Another salvo. 8 more ships gone in brilliant flashes. Richard slumped in his command chair, the weight of catastrophic failure crushing down on him. 73 ships remained out of 300. The Galactic Council chamber had never felt this heavy with tension. Ambassador Victor Blackwood stood in the center of the circular room, no longer displaying the arrogance that had defined him just weeks earlier. His scales looked dull and his movements carried the weight of catastrophic defeat. Around him sat representatives from 4 to 7 species, and every single one stared at him with a mixture of shock, fear, and grim satisfaction. Counselor Margaret Hayes, her crystalline form pulsing with soft blue light, broke the uncomfortable silence. Ambassador Blackwood, please present your official report to the Council. Victor's clawed hands trembled slightly as he activated the holographic display system. Footage from the battle began playing in the air above the podium. Ships disintegrating under impossible impacts. The asteroid belt lighting up with weapons fire that seemed to come from nowhere. The systematic destruction of an entire armada. The images were brutal and undeniable. 300 ships, Victor said, his voice barely louder than a whisper. The finest warships of the Krathak's empire, commanded by our most experienced officers, equipped with technology that has conquered a dozen worlds. We lost 277 vessels. Gone. Simply erased from existence as if they had never been built. A young counselor from the Polaris Confederation raised a glowing appendage. And the human casualties, Ambassador? How many ships did they lose in this engagement? Victor's laugh was bitter and broken. 4 ships. Only 4. And our intelligence officers now believe those 4 were deliberately sacrificed to draw our forces into trap zones. They played us like children playing a simple game. Every move we made was predicted. Every tactic we tried was counted before we even fully executed it. The chamber erupted in shocked sounds. Species chittered, hummed, flickered with alarmed colors, and released clouds of concerned pheromones. Elder Thomas, the ancient Vrixian, clicked his mandibles with a sound that translated as deep sadness. We tried to warn you, Ambassador. We tried very hard to make you understand. Your warnings were completely inadequate. Victor snapped, some of his old fire returning briefly. You spoke of complications and old quarantine zones. You mentioned historical concerns. You did not say they were absolute monsters capable of this level of systematic destruction. They are not monsters, Margaret corrected gently, her form pulsing with patient amber light. They are survivors. There is an important difference between those two things. The massive chamber doors opened with a deep mechanical sound, and every representative turned to look. Ambassador James Mitchell entered, flanked by 2 human security officers wearing simple black uniforms. James was a distinguished-looking man in his 50s with gray hair and calm eyes. He wore a plain diplomatic uniform without decorations. He looked completely ordinary, nothing like a representative of the species that had just committed wholesale slaughter against a galactic military power. James walked calmly to the central podium and looked around the chamber with professional neutrality. Honored counselors, I have been instructed by my government to provide Earth's official statement regarding the recent military engagement with the Krathak's empire. Engagement? Victor's voice dripped with bitter disbelief. You call that horror an engagement? You massacred us. You destroyed an entire fleet. James turned to face him directly, his expression never changing. What would you prefer I call it, Ambassador Blackwood? We did not invade your territory. We did not threaten your worlds. We did not fire the first shot. Your empire sent 300 warships to attack our homeworld because we refused to pay tribute to vessels passing through our sovereign space. You initiated hostilities. We responded appropriately. Appropriately? Victor's voice rose to a shout. 277 ships destroyed is appropriate. We could have destroyed all 300, James replied, his voice becoming cold as ice. He activated his own holographic display, showing tactical data. At multiple points during the engagement, we had clear firing solutions that would have eliminated every remaining Krathax vessel in your fleet. We deliberately chose not to take those shots. Why? Margaret asked, her crystalline form pulsing with genuine curiosity. Because dead soldiers tell no stories, James explained simply. Survivors carry messages. We wanted your empire and the entire galactic community to understand something very clearly. Humanity is not weak. We are not prey. We are not victims waiting to be conquered. And we will not tolerate unprovoked aggression against our territory or our people. Lady Catherine Wells of the Polaris Confederation, one of the younger council members, spoke up carefully. Ambassador Mitchell, there are old records in our archives. Sealed records about humanity's previous conflicts. About the Zathol swarm 500 years ago. About the border wars 300 years ago. These records were classified and hidden. Why were they sealed? James was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. Because the elder species thought it would be better if the galaxy did not know the full truth about humanity. They believed that if everyone understood what we were truly capable of, it would create fear. It would lead to conflict. It might even trigger a coalition war against Earth by species who would see us as an existential threat. Were they wrong to think that? Catherine asked softly. I suppose we are about to find out, James replied. He pulled up more historical data. Since you are asking about our history, let us discuss it openly. Yes, humanity fought the Zathol swarm. The swarm consisted of 10,000 bioengineered warships, living vessels that consumed organic matter for fuel. They had weapons that converted entire populations into food. They possessed a hive mind that saw all other intelligent life as resources to be harvested and consumed. The hologram showed images of Zathol bioships. They looked like massive organs crossed with warships, grotesque and terrifying. The Zathol attacked Earth because they detected our population of 8 billion humans. We looked like a convenient food source to them. James's expression darkened with old anger. The war lasted 17 years. During that time, humanity developed biological weapons specifically designed to target Zathol physiology. We created nanodisassemblers that could break down their bioships at the molecular level. We engineered genetic targeting viruses. We built what we called sterile field generators, devices that prevented biological matter from reproducing at the cellular level. Several counselors made sounds of horror and disgust. We did not simply defeat the Zathol, James continued relentlessly. We hunted them across 17 star systems. We found every bioship. We located every breeding colony. We destroyed every egg cluster on every world they had ever touched. We eradicated them so completely that genetic samples exist in only 3 secure vaults on Earth. We did this because the Zathol represented an existential threat to humanity. They wanted to consume us, so we made absolutely certain they could never threaten any species ever again. Elder Thomas clicked softly. And the border wars, Ambassador Mitchell. 3 species decided humanity's growing colonial presence was a threat that needed to be contained. They formed a military coalition. 7,000 ships attacked our outer colonies. James showed more footage. We developed autonomous warfare platforms. Self-replicating hunter mines. Drone swarms that could operate independently for years. When the war ended 3 years later, all 3 species had permanently lost their capacity for interstellar warfare. We did not exterminate them, but we made certain they could never threaten us again. The chamber fell into stunned silence. You see, James said quietly, humanity learned something during 5,000 years of fighting ourselves before we reached the stars. We learned that survival requires doing whatever is necessary. We learned that you do not win wars by being fair or honorable. You win by being thorough and by making the cost of aggression so high that no rational actor would ever consider it. Victor found his voice again. The Krathax Empire will not accept this humiliation. We will appeal to this council. We will form coalitions. We will gather allies and return with overwhelming force. You will do nothing, James interrupted, and several counselors actually flinched at his tone. Because right now, at this very moment, there is a human warship in orbit around every single Krathax colony world. Not attacking. Not threatening. Just present. Watching. Waiting. A reminder of what happens when species make poor decisions. Victor's face went pale beneath his scales. That is impossible. You cannot possibly have that many ships positioned so quickly. Can we not? James smiled without warmth. Ambassador, You made assumptions about human military capabilities based on what we chose to show you. Those 4 to 5 warships defending Earth? They were our active patrol fleet. Did you really believe that represented our entire naval capacity? He displayed another holographic image, and the entire chamber gasped collectively. Thousands of ship signatures appeared, scattered throughout human-controlled space. We have been building for 300 years, Ambassador Blackwood. Every colony, every space station, every orbital facility. Some were genuinely civilian. But most were military installations disguised as mining operations and agricultural centers. We have been preparing for 3 centuries for the day when someone would test us with serious force. The Galactic Council descended into chaos over the following weeks. Species that had once ignored humanity now desperately sought private meetings with human diplomats. The Krathax Empire demanded justice and sanctions. The elder species urged caution and patience. Younger civilizations, terrified of what they had witnessed, began frantically negotiating separate peace treaties with Earth to ensure they would never face human military power. Councillor Margaret Hayes called an emergency session to address what everyone now called simply the lesson. The chamber filled with representatives, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. Fear hung in the air like thick smoke. When Ambassador James Mitchell entered, species that had once barely acknowledged humanity now watched his every movement with nervous attention. James stood at the central podium and looked around calmly. The human government has prepared terms for a permanent resolution to this conflict. We believe these terms are fair and reasonable given the circumstances. A holographic document appeared in the air, visible to all council members. The terms were surprisingly simple. The Krathax Empire would issue a formal apology. They would pay reparations calculated based on ammunition expended and equipment damaged, not punitive damages. No Krathax military vessels would enter human space for 100 years without explicit permission. A neutral zone 5 light-years deep would be established between human and Krathax territories. Victor Blackwood stared at the terms in disbelief. These are actually reasonable. Why? You could demand anything. You could demand our complete surrender. James met his eyes steadily. Because humanity does not want an empire, Ambassador. We want to be left alone to grow and explore. We want to trade with species who wish to trade fairly. We want to defend ourselves against those who threaten us. That is all we have ever wanted. But you could conquer, Victor said quietly. With your military power, you could dominate the entire council. We could, James agreed. But we learned something from our own history. Empires always fall. Conquerors always face rebellion. Peace built on fear and domination never lasts. We would rather have difficult neighbors than resentful subjects. Lady Catherine Wells spoke up carefully. Ambassador Mitchell, your government mentioned sharing technology. Could you explain that proposal? James nodded and pulled up technical specifications. These are the designs for our shield generators, the ones that survived the initial Krathax bombardment. We are willing to provide these defensive systems to council members as a gesture of goodwill. Not weapons, but defenses. Why would you give away military technology? Margaret asked, genuinely confused. Because strong defenses prevent wars before they start, James explained. Because we would rather trade with prosperous neighbors than conquer broken enemies. And because some of you tried very hard to warn the Krathax before this disaster happened. You deserve better tools to defend yourselves. Over the next month, something unprecedented happened. The Krathax Emperor himself, an ancient warrior named Malcolm Hayes who had ruled for 2 centuries, traveled personally to the Galactic Council. He was old, scarred from countless battles, and moved slowly. But he carried himself with dignity. Emperor Malcolm stood before the assembled council and spoke in a voice roughened by age. The Krathax Empire formally apologizes to the human people and to this council. Our actions were driven by pride and ignorance. We underestimated those we did not understand. We accept Earth's terms completely and will honor them faithfully. We have learned a painful but necessary lesson about the true cost of arrogance. Ambassador James Mitchell stood and bowed respectfully. The human government accepts your apology, Emperor Malcolm. We hope this marks the beginning of better relations between our peoples. We did not want this war. We took no pleasure in the deaths of your soldiers. But we will always defend our home and our people with everything we possess. The Emperor nodded slowly. I understand, Ambassador. And I will ensure my empire remembers this lesson for generations to come. As the formal proceedings concluded, Elder Thomas approached James in a private corridor outside the main chamber. The ancient Vrixian's mandibles clicked with concern. You have changed everything today, Thomas said quietly. The balance of galactic power has shifted completely. Nothing will ever be the same. James looked tired suddenly, older than his years. We did not want to change anything, Elder. We wanted to build our colonies in peace. To explore the stars. To learn from older civilizations. But the Krathax forced our hand. Some species will fear you now. Some will seek to form coalitions to contain your power. We know, James replied. We have prepared for that possibility. Thomas clicked thoughtfully. How prepared? James met the Elder's multifaceted eyes. The fleet that defended Earth represented about 30% of our total naval capacity. The ships that appeared over Krathax worlds were another 15%. We have been building for 3 centuries with one guiding principle that governs everything we do. What principle? Never again, James said softly. Never again will humanity face extinction unprepared. Never again will we trust completely in the goodwill of strangers. Never again will we be victims. We will be good neighbors to those who treat us fairly. We will be generous trading partners to those who deal honestly. But to those who threaten us. His expression hardened. We will be the last thing they ever see. Thomas was silent for a long moment. That is a lonely path you have chosen. Perhaps, James agreed. But it is a path where we survive. Where our children grow up safe. Where Earth remains free. That is worth any price. Margaret Hayes joined them, her crystalline form pulsing with troubled colors. What happens now, James? Where does the galaxy go from here? That depends on everyone else, James said. Humanity has shown what we are capable of when threatened. Now the rest of the galaxy must decide how they want to proceed. We are offering friendship and trade to those who want it. We are offering our defensive technology to help protect against aggression. We are offering a chance for genuine peace built on mutual respect rather than dominance. And if species choose confrontation instead? Margaret asked. James looked out through the transparent wall at the stars beyond.